Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for this live stream. My name is Neil. I'm part of the Global Professional Development team here at Oxford University Press. And we're all very happy to have you here today. We've got Jeremy with us today as well.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeremy Bowell. I am one of the authors of Life Vision, which is OUP's new international secondary course. Lovely to be here.
So yeah, lovely to have everyone connected. I'm here based in Madrid. So do say hello in the comments. Tell us where you are in the world and say hello. So great to see everybody. So we're here today to talk about mediation, and specifically mediation as it relates to teenagers. And Jeremy's going to tell us a little bit about how those elements are incorporated into Life Vision. So maybe a good way to start off is by asking you how familiar you are with the term mediation. So let us know in the comments as well. How familiar are you with it? Maybe you've never heard of it. Maybe you have heard the term, but you're not really sure what it is, or maybe it's an important element in your classes. So
let's stress that we're talking about mediation and not meditation.
Not meditation, yes. Nothing to do with meditation, unfortunately.
Hello to everybody. Hello to Tunisia, Mexico, Bună ziua to Romania, Myanmar. Wow, we have a really international audience today. Buenos Aires, hello.
Yeah, great to see so many different countries represented. Okay, so while we're starting maybe with that question, while you're letting us know how familiar you are with the term, maybe, the obvious place to start off is with the question, what is mediation? Okay, so, if you aren't familiar with that term of mediation in the English language classroom, and as Jeremy said, maybe you are thinking of meditation, but it really doesn't have anything to do with meditation at all, I'm afraid. But maybe you've heard of the term mediation in relation to maybe like conflict resolution, and we can draw some parallels with conflict resolution, I think, because the idea there is that somebody gets in the middle of two conflicting parties and they help them to find some common ground and to resolve the conflict. And that idea of maybe getting in the middle is really what I think something that we can cling on to when we're describing what mediation is in the English language classroom. So maybe rather than two conflicted parties, what we could be talking about is two people who can't understand each other because they maybe speak two different languages. And you as the mediator, you're getting in the middle and you're helping them to understand. And as Beck here has said, they're bridge building. Yes, exactly. Very good. So the Common European Framework companion volume, where we get a lot of our descriptions of mediation, does describe mediation as kind of mediators as kind of acting as social bridges. And I think that's a really good way to talk about it. And they also kind of talk about kind of three types of mediation activity. So the first is that idea of mediating communication between two people, maybe of different languages. But another one maybe is mediating a text. So if you think of like, you're in Madrid with your French friend Pierre, help him to understand the menu so that he can order his lunch. That's a type of everyday mediation that we might see. And the last kind then is kind of mediating concepts. So mediating concepts is helping people to formulate thoughts, to express their ideas. And that might be a bit fluid. That might be your own understanding might change as you mediate concepts. And this kind of stuff happens a lot in maybe group work and pair work. So can you guys see any kind of maybe parallels there between those kind of activities and the stuff that you guys see in your course books? What do you think?
I think that's a good point from Angelina there. Mediation is very important, solving problems, and I think that's a big part of it, which comes into the many aspects of life, of skills that it's key for our students to need. And as we talk more and more about these global skills, the kind of things that our students will be needing when they leave school and go out into the world of work, problem solving, critical thinking, these are really important.
Yeah, I think so. I think that leads on to an interesting question. So maybe a more interesting question on what is mediation is, like, why are we talking about mediation now? And why has mediation become much more popular or much more of a hot topic in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think really there's kind of two reasons for that. So one is kind of like the spread of English as this kind of international language, you know, and communication is really dependent on the context in which it occurs. So as mediators, we need to have, you know, a much broader socio-cultural awareness of the whole world so that we can communicate effectively in different countries and different cultures. And secondly, it's kind of linked to the job market, what you were saying there. So I think the World Economic Forum kind of identified the top 10, you know, desirable skills for employers for the future. And, you know, maybe traditionally they would have been things like, you know, being able to build things and construct things. But in the future, they're more these kind of soft skills that you're talking about, the ability to work in teams, the ability to communicate in cross-cultural contexts, this kind of thing. And really mediation and that ability to communicate and understand people is a core skill that employers are looking for in the future.
Mm-hmm. And that was something when we were developing Life Vision, that was key to the course. These idea of, you know, these soft skills, these global skills, such as things like collaboration, cultural awareness, showing empathy with each other, critical thinking. These are something that very much form sort of at the heart of the course. And users of the course will see that we try and sort of introduce these in a kind of soft and gentle way in almost every lesson, because we recognize, as Neil said, that this is something that's going to be so important in the future and indeed now.
Yeah, I think Ahmed has made an interesting comment there that a teacher is a mediator of a course, you know, between the text and the student, you know, especially if they're learning English as a second language. So that's very true. You know, the teacher is getting in the middle between the course book and the textbook and helping the student understand it better, helping them work on different skills and things like that. So yeah, Ahmed, very, very good point. So everybody, you know, if you do have specific questions about mediation or the thing that you'd like to learn or like to know from either Jeremy or me, do let us know in the comments. Maybe we can talk now, Jeremy, a little bit why we think mediation is specifically important for teenagers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I mean, teenagers are at that age where obviously their maturity is growing, and what they're learning and what they're needing to do in order to sort of negotiate their way through life is changing. And, you know, relationships are developing, their horizons are broadening, and so it's a key time. And so these kind of skills that they're going to need, such as building bridges between perhaps, you know, their sort of their parents themselves, their teachers, their friends, etc., are kind of really sort of critical. So I think now is if you're teaching teenagers, now is the time to really start considering bringing sort of ideas around mediation and all these things that we are talking about into your classroom. And yeah, that's something we certainly do in Life Vision, which, as I say, is a secondary course. So it's designed for students aged from around about, you know, 13, 14 onwards to sort of 18, 19.
Yeah, I think you know a key element of mediation as well is kind of empathy and having emotional intelligence. You know, because you if you're going to help someone understand something, you kind of need to be aware of their needs, what they do understand, what they don't understand, what maybe their cultural expectations might be. So I think when teenagers are really in the moment where they're developing that sense of emotional intelligence and they're developing their sense of empathy, so it's really a great time to really be working with mediation and develop with that age group, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one thing that, just as a reminder from a couple of the comments I see, it's this idea now, as we now see English obviously as a global language. And I think, you know, we were talking about this the other day, this idea that interactions are no longer about, say, sort of a native speaker perhaps and a non-native speaker. Most interactions in English take place between two non-native speakers. So it's really important when those conversations, interactions are happening, that both participants are sort of aware of the English that they're using, aware of how to use it, aware of the culture of the other person, and all these other things that are key when two non-native speakers are conversing. And I'm sure we've all been in situations where we've observed that happening, sometimes very successfully, because both people sort of recognize and have empathy with each other and understand the difficulties, other times perhaps not so successfully.
Yeah, I can see Monse there has said that it's, it's interesting to link mediation to empathy, and that's very true. And I think that comes to kind of an evolved way that we're using language now. So, in the past, there was a lot more kind of what I would call transactional language, where, you might have to ask someone, oh, how do I get to the post office? We don't do that anymore. We just look on Google Maps, and Google tells us how to get to the post office. And how to order a hamburger. We don't really do that in McDonald's anymore. We go to a machine and we talk to the machine and we order our hamburger there. So that kind of transactional, interaction is becoming less important and less relevant for us to teach. And the kind of interpersonal communication, the kind of more effective kind of communication, where we're talking about maybe feelings, our cultural history, things like this. So it's much more important to give our learners, and especially our teen learners, these kind of tools to be able to communicate to that kind of more interpersonal level, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly something that we explore a lot in Life Vision, because exactly as Neil said, all those sort of interactions and standard things we would teach sort of 10, 15 years ago, we perhaps move away from that now. And one thing we do in the course to highlight this is we have sections in the book called Think and Share, and you'll see these in every lessons of the course. And what they do, it just sort of takes students outside of that lesson and gets them relating what they've learned to their own lives, and then talking to their partner or in a group, around the topic, but getting them to think about it more, to ask more sort of meaningful questions about it, and to share their sort of experiences more. So yeah, that's certainly something that's key to what we're doing.
Okay, so maybe we can have a look at a little more about what mediation looks like in the classroom. And I think an interesting way of kind of exploring that is looking at mediation strategies. So we linked the Common European Framework Companion volume. If you really want to go deep into mediation, by all means, have a look at that. But that's a very long, dense document. You might be better off just checking out our position paper, the OUP position paper, which is a short 4 or 5 page document that's going to give you the basics, the essential information on mediation. But we also have our PD module. So it's like an interactive online little professional development learning module that will go through and give you some more information as well. So there's loads of good resources. But just for now, let's talk about these mediation strategies, because these are some things that we could incorporate into our classes. So one of the key mediation skills, I think, is explaining new concepts. And you kind of talked about think, pair, share there, I think, Jeremy, and these kind of activities. But we can also do things like linking to previous knowledge. We could break down complicated information, and we can maybe adapt our language to the person we're speaking to. So I think a key element of like the first two there, linking to previous knowledge and breaking down complicated information, is giving our learners the functional language that they need to do those tasks. So, it's things like "it's a bit like," or "have you heard of," or "do you know," those kind of key functional languages. And the same with breaking down complicated information, and I think there are definitely little bits of mediation that we can work and combine in our classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something we often do with the strategies. If you sort of look at the course, you'll see in the reading lessons, the listening lessons, the receptive skills lessons, and we deal with a lot of strategies that are actually very closely linked with this idea of mediation, idea of breaking down complicated information. So we're teaching students to be able to skim read texts so they can summarize it, to recognize things like topic sentences that they'll find in the text, to basically recognize the key information that they can then sort of summarize more succinctly. And what we also have in the book, in the back of the book, sections are vocabulary booster sections. Now, these are extra parts that are linked to the vocabulary, the core vocabulary we teach in the book. But what these do is extend students' skills with using words, and you'll find activities that get students to think about synonyms, think about kind of more perhaps colloquial phrases and things like that that are kind of commonly used in English, and that will help students take perhaps difficult information and make it more digestible.
Yeah, I think, you know, at its core, mediation is finding ways to help the person you're speaking to understand the message, or that either you're saying, or the piece of information they couldn't understand without you. You're trying to find those strategies that can help them understand. So as you said, you know, a knowledge of synonyms is really going to be useful, because if they don't understand one piece of vocabulary, being able to express that concept using different words is really helpful, as is paraphrasing, you know, so larger bits of information, and we say it in a different way, and we tailor what we're saying really to our audience. And that comes back again to empathy, I think. So when we're specifically speaking about a text, I mean, the CEFR talks about kind of two ways of simplifying a text, and one of them is called amplifying a dense text. Okay, and that sounds a little bit complicated, but really what that is, you can imagine a really, you know, difficult type of text, you know, like rocket science or brain surgery. If I'm reading that, I'm going to have, you know, even if it's in English, I'm going to have a really difficult time understanding it. So maybe kind of that strategy is kind of saying things like, you know, in layman's terms, explaining it, saying it again in a very simple way, breaking down very topic specific vocabulary and using more easy to understand vocabulary. So again, as you were saying, synonyms and paraphrasing is key there, I think.
And one of the other skills is dealing with unknown words. I mean, this is something obviously students will often encounter, and the more that we can help them to not to be, should we say, cowed, or not to be sort of concerned or worried or scared from a text that has a lot of unknown words, actually giving them strategies that they can use to sort of deal with those words and the number of different things. But that can certainly help them with breaking down a text, amplifying a text, as I say, as you'd say, putting a text in layman's terms.
Yeah, so I mean, Angelina has said a great comment there. Mediation implies cultural knowledge too, and that is, you know, that is very, very true. And that kind of comes back to what we were saying at the start about communication being very context dependent. You know, so something that we say in Madrid might have a slightly different meaning in Oxford, might have a slightly different meaning in, you know, wherever it's said in the world. So good mediators are aware also that, you know, it's almost impossible to have sociocultural knowledge of every single culture in the world, but good mediators are open to new cultures. They're open to finding out about new situations, new contexts. They're interested. So all these kind of skills about developing sociocultural awareness are also really going to help people be better mediators, I think.
And I think, yeah, there's two things there. There's that sort of the cultural awareness of other cultures, and linked to that very closely is that idea of actually being more aware of your own culture. And I think that's something a lot we try and do in the course book with the lessons that are dealing with sort of cross-cultural situations. One of the first questions we will always ask students to do is think about their own culture. And because I don't think enough of us actually spend much time thinking about the idiosyncrasies, the kind of the curiosities of our own culture. And I think that can really help us then in terms of our empathy, and in terms of how we present ourselves, and in terms of how we mediate ourselves when we are talking to someone from a different culture.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, English Espresso, I think that's how you say it, has made an interesting comment there, that don't you think current international relationships make it evident there is a need for better mediation skills, generally speaking? And I think absolutely. You know, mediation is all about greater understanding, greater tolerance, greater openness to different cultures and different ways of life. So I think, you know, that can only be good, right? That we all understand each other better and are all more tolerant and more open to each other as well. So yeah, definitely would agree there. Let's have a look. Okay, so yeah, I think one thing I kind of would say about mediation is that, you know, there's a sense that maybe mediation is new, but really mediation is happening all the time. You know, it's something that we've done for a long time. Teachers are mediators in that they mediate the topic that they teach to their students. So I think you need to kind of be aware of that you're kind of always doing mediation to a certain extent. And as a teacher, maybe what you can do is kind of up the level of mediation in the activity. So if you're aware of things like, you know, increasing empathy, you could ask your students to do things like, if there's a narrative in a reading you're doing, you could say, you know, what would you do? What would you have done in that situation? Or how would you have reacted if that happened to you? So I think being aware of mediation and what mediation is and its core ideas helps you to spot opportunities in your classes where you can, as I said, you know, turn up the volume on the mediation activities that you're doing.
It's just reminded me, there's a really good activity in OUP's Global Skills Toolkit, which you can find online for free on the website. Looking at that very thing, the idea of empathy and what it does, and you can use it with any text. That's what's great about it. Any text where there is some kind of story happening, and it's a worksheet, and it encourages sort of students to pick a character from the story that they've read about, and then think about what they're experiencing. And it really goes into detail, so how that character is feeling, what they are seeing, what their motivation is, what they might do next, what has caused this to happen to them, and all these things. And it's a really powerful thing to get students to put themselves in the shoes of someone else. So I think the activity is called In Their Shoes, and worth checking out, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, Jeremy, because if you're in a situation where you're trying to help someone to understand something, so whether that be something as simple as a menu, or maybe they're lost in the middle of a festival somewhere and they have no idea what's going on, the best way you can help them understand is really understanding where they're coming from, because that's going to give you an idea of what, you know, maybe preconceptions they have, how they might be interpreting what's happening, and that's going to help you to then tailor what you say to give them the quickest and you know, most effective way of understanding what is actually happening, whether that is, you know, a text, as I said, or something very different, you know. So again, I agree, that's a really great activity, that idea of, you know, walking in someone else's shoes. I think it links to what Maria was saying as well. She was saying that it's about social awareness and self-awareness. And I think that's very true. And a good way, you know, a really great starting point for having broad sociocultural awareness is having a good awareness of your own culture, because it's only when you kind of are aware of the idiosyncrasies of your own culture and how it's maybe similar to others and different to others, that's when you start saying, oh, okay, this is how we fit into like maybe the global culture and how we are a little bit different or similar.
Yep. One thing I often did with my students is show them photos that, often without context, just to get them thinking about simple photos, for example, of a people queuing, which certainly in British culture, that's a very, should we say, important part of life. And then getting students to think about how they do it in their own culture and what happens. And the things I would look at, queuing was one, meal times and the etiquette around meal times and eating was another one. Timekeeping is something else, which we all have different ideas of. And I think all these things, when you start to get students to think about what happens in their own culture, it can really sort of open them up. I remember a time recently I arranged to meet a colleague of mine who was not British. I won't say where she was from, but and she sent me a message about 5 minutes after we were due to meet, saying I'm on my way, and I didn't really understand what she meant by I'm on my way. Did she mean I'm almost here? And it turns out her being on her way was I've just left my house, and she arrived 45 minutes late. And she thought that was fine because she texted me, and I wasn't very happy. But yeah, I think we both learned a lesson that day.
Yeah, and I mean, and that gets to the heart of what we're talking about, isn't it? You know, maybe in certain cultures, being 15 minutes late is actually expected. You know, that if you say 2 o'clock, nobody's showing up to 2:15. So having an awareness ahead of that time, and knowing that you shouldn't be there for the next 15 minutes eases a lot of those maybe tensions, and adds to that greater understanding as well. I mean, going back to like what you were saying there about queuing, I think a great activity you can do with your students to kind of broaden their awareness is if you are looking at something, maybe, I don't know, let's say birthday parties. You could set as maybe some homework, you know, divide into the class into four. One group looks at birthday parties in Ireland, where I'm from. Another part looks at birthday parties in Spain. Another looks at, I can see May there's from Bangkok, so someone looks into Bangkok, you know, and then they come back and they report together and they make two lists, you know, similarities in birthday parties and maybe differences in birthday parties, and they can in that way grow their cultural understanding and awareness, I think.
Yeah.
So I can see Patty there has made an interesting comment. It's also important to invite students to be mediators in the classroom among their peers. And I think that's very true. Yeah, there's a mediation activity which is called mediating concepts. And that's all about how people kind of interact with each other when they're doing group work and pair work. So if you're a skilled mediator of concepts, you're able to, you know, facilitate people to express their ideas. You're able to create a welcoming space whereby you know, people feel open and able to share their ideas, and you're able to, you know, share the turns and manage maybe the discussion so that everybody has equal amounts. So yeah, I think a really good really good idea to get students involved in that. And I think that really connects to teenagers as well, and helping them to have that safe space and feel comfortable communicating with each other.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, something we do a lot in the course, which is, feeding into what you've just said, in both the speaking strand, the speaking lessons that we have in the course. You know, every lesson has a sort of strategy that it focuses on, and they will be strategies such as turn taking, which is really important. Recognizing, you know, when someone else needs to talk and when you need to listen. Sort of signposting your conversations to make it clearer that for the other person to understand. Negotiating is another key thing there. So yeah, you know, we've got that sort of throughout the course in the speaking lessons, and then also in our global skills lessons, where we get students to think more sort of, should we say, in a different way about their interactions with each other. And we, for example, we would have lessons on sensitivity and showing sensitivity and being supportive of fellow students. We'll have lessons on cultural customs, which we've talked about, on how to give advice, you know, and how to recognize different people's feelings when you're sort of involved in a conversation. So yeah, lots of different things there which all sort of link into what we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think giving advice is a good one, because if you kind of, you know, students need to be aware maybe of the pragmatic meaning behind what they're saying. So maybe you might look in the course book and you give advice with you should and you shouldn't, you know, and maybe my mum can tell me, Neil, you should do this and you shouldn't do that, but it seems a little bossy. But maybe we, in a more polite way, we might use the second condition, you know, oh, if I were you, I would, or, you know, maybe you might. So, you know, that kind of awareness maybe of beyond just the functional meaning of the words, the kind of like pragmatic meaning of words, and how your words go down in different contexts can be very important as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I think, you know, one thing about mediation is that maybe there's a slightly different kind of focus. I think, you know, in traditional kind of speaking activities and things, quite often our students, we're a bit worried, especially in language classes. We're kind of thinking about what we are saying, and am I saying it accurately? Am I saying it correctly? And we're very much focused on our delivery if we're language students in a language class. And I think the shift to mediation is away from that specific accuracy of our own production to the success of the communication. So when we're mediating, we're probably thinking more about the person we're talking to, and we're thinking, okay, did you understand me there? Did you get that? How do you see that? So we're constantly maybe monitoring understanding, and we're maybe adapting our language to just make sure that was understood, our message, using synonyms, using paraphrasing, as you said. So I think that's maybe an important thing to say as well, that kind of shift of focus from us and what we're saying and how accurate it is to just, is it being understood at the other end?
Mm-hmm. So someone like it wants to attend a game of tennis, and it's about getting the ball over the net. And sometimes it doesn't matter how you do that, but as long as you get the ball over the net, and the other person receives it, then we can say that is that's successful. And I think certainly that idea of focusing less on accuracy. Accuracy is important. We've obviously got to teach the rules and the language. That's the basis. That's the basis of the knowledge. But then it's that's being able to, it's the nuances, but more just communicating in a way that's appropriate to the context and the circumstances, which isn't always about accuracy. And I think certainly in the UK, sort of my experience is like British people will forgive very easily inaccurate English, but perhaps what they find harder to forgive is a misuse of intonation that can sometimes appear perhaps rude or aggressive or something. These are the things that British people, they have more sort of problems with. So that's quite interesting, I think, in this context.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, I don't mean to say that we should, forget completely about accuracy and things like this, because I mean, at the end of the day, mediating is a language activity. So any kind of practice that is increasing your language proficiency is at the end of the day going to help you to be a better mediator as well, I think. So if you go back to like the idea of mediating a text, imagine you have a task and it says your German friend is in Spain and they're trying to read, they're in an art gallery and they're reading the little plaque beside the painting. You need to be able to read that in Spanish, understand that in Spanish, then think about what's important for your German friend, and then in German maybe, or in English, explain those key points. So unlike maybe other language activities, there's kind of two levels to mediation, isn't there? There's that kind of receptive side where you're taking in some information, you're understanding it, you're filtering it for yourself, for your own understanding, and then you're moving on and you're having a productive stage where you're saying, okay, right, well, now I need to produce this information in language that's adapted and appropriate to my audience, and give the relevant information for my audience as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's it, and that's how we try to do it with the course books in every part of the course books. That's how we try, and let's say teach the grammar is getting students to think about the meaning first of all. That's how we would sort of teach the vocabulary, so they can go through that process, of understanding, filtering, then sort of paraphrasing, and then presenting to the other person.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Okay. So I think, maybe we can just say now one last kind of message on mediation, or one kind of key takeaway on mediation that we might have. And I think if I was to say what it was, I think that, mediation may sound new and complicated, but it's not really. Good mediators are good communicators. They care about whether the person they're talking to has understood them. They care about the effect that their language is having. So I would say, don't be frightened of mediation. It's just basically good communication. So if you teach your students to be good communicators, you're certainly teaching them to be good mediators as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just adding to that, for me, you know, it's all about confidence, really. It's always all about giving out communicators, you know, and that is the purpose, really, of any good course book, where we're trying to do that, give students plenty of opportunity to practice that, to learn the language they use, the knowledge that they use, but then to give them plenty of opportunity to practice, to speak, to listen, you know, in a safe space in the classroom, you know, with the teacher, with their classmates, etc. So, you know, eventually they leave school and they are become confident speakers, communicators, of English.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, everyone, make sure you check out Life Vision, because Life Vision is really going to help with the teaching of mediation. It
Here it
incorporates,
is.
yeah, it
Beautiful
incorporates
colours as well.
loads of
They
the
let
ideas.
you. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, loads of ideas, very specifically for teenagers, working with mediation for teenagers and helping them develop maybe that emotional intelligence and those soft skills that they need for the, you know, for the 21st century. You can find out way more about mediation on our focus paper. And if you're feeling like you want even more information, get out there and do our PD module as well. You can have a link to the PD module there. If you like this live session, make sure you like it. If you loved it, make sure you love it. And please do share this as well. So if you know a teacher that needs this in their life, tag them in the comments right now, as this really helps us to spread the word on the events that we're doing. And, you know, we want to make these sessions all about you. You are our teaching community. So let us know in the comments as well. What would you like to see us talking about? What kind of content areas would you like to see us cover? So make sure you're following us so you don't miss any of these sessions we've got coming up. We're OUP-ELT Global on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Thanks to everybody who commented in the comments. It was great to see all of you here today. And a huge thank you, last but not least, to Jeremy for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a really nice, real pleasure to have the opportunity to think about this, first of all, to talk about it and to share it. And I thought there was a really nice comment just there from Elena, who mentioned about creating a positive environment in the classroom is as important as accuracy, and I think that's absolutely true, and yeah, something we should all think about. Yeah.
Absolutely. And a great way to leave it. A great final thought, I think. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Jeremy. So goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Bye bye.